Hi, Luke. Just waiting for see who turns up.
Afternoon, everyone.
Hey.
Hi, Chris.
Hi.
Hi everyone, very quiet.
Hi all.
Hi, sorry, I'm just waiting.
Oh,
for
sorry, you're doing something.
everyone. Just trying to get the latest version of the document.
Okay, sorry. I just jumped in and nobody was speaking.
We're waiting for you, Jasmina, that's all.
Oh, sorry. It's good to be here. I missed a few of these meetings. How was the vaccine, Valerie?
Oh, it's fine, thank you. Yeah, no problem.
Great.
Slightly sore arm again, you know, but nothing
No
worth.
headache or anything?
Oh, a little bit, but nothing much.
Okay.
You know,
Good.
no major. But I didn't last time, and I think they said with the second one it could be worse on Pfizer, but it was similar. It was fine.
It was Pfizer?
Yeah.
Good, good. I'm jealous.
Well, that's what they were using way back 12 weeks ago here, at least, and then they switched. But all my immediate neighbours in the same sort of age group, we all got Pfizer. So
has anyone else had the vaccine?
I had it.
Oh yes.
I had AstraZeneca and it seemed okay. I mean,
okay.
Oh, I had it and I was knocked out for about a week.
You
Really?
had AstraZeneca?
Yeah. Partly,
Which one did you have?
The AstraZeneca, and I refused to be knocked out, and I think that was a mistake. Given after gone to bed.
do you think you'd had it before? Do you think you'd had the actual infection, Peter?
Sorry?
I wondered if you thought you'd actually had the infection at some point, because my daughter was knocked out, but she thinks she was probably had been infected way back last February. I mean, you know, more than a year ago.
I don't think so. I had a cold at the time. I don't know whether that affected it.
Yeah.
Who knows? One of those things.
Just one of those things. I think people have different bodies and immune systems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of feel for my wife, we had it at the same time. She got a bit ill, and I felt that kind of if you get ill, it kind of shows that your body has noticed the vaccine.
Yes, I mean,
So it might think,
One of my friends told me that and said it proves it works.
It's sort of a way to work that something happened to the body, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't
well,
right.
I'm worried in that basis because I had the AstraZeneca and I really didn't notice. So
You're just too healthy,
was it
Dennis.
a placebo of some kind? You know, trial of trial, I don't know about.
No, placebo is quite effective, I thought. I mean, so as long as you believe.
As long as I believe in it, I'll be all right. Okay.
It's psychological. Now we're going to start modeling psychological effect of the vaccine.
But as soon as you start questioning it, that's where you get the nocebo effects. You definitely don't. Want to do
Well, I would really like to have it so I can go. Sorry to be so selfish, but to go on summer holiday and lie in sunbathe somewhere at some point. That is my intention. I have never not had a tan, and I don't have it. I haven't had it this past 2 years. Sorry to be a bit selfish. So what are we reading? Sorry, the one with DV at the end.
Yes, that's the one. So I've had comments from quite a few people, which has been great, and I've tried to incorporate as many of those as possible. And there were a few from Luke, which I felt might warrant further discussion as a group before I did anything about them. So I've left those on the document. And if people, I know Chris replied to one of them in his comments, but I just wondered if people have any particular viewpoints on.
I'm sorry, I
any of
haven't had
these.
a chance to look.
No, that's fine. I was going to go through it now anyway with everyone just to. So the first one is relating to, we talk about the unit of measurement from the model. And Luke queried whether or not this was a common term or whether we just meant level of aggregation. My understanding is the unit of measurement can include some level of aggregation, but it's probably a bit wider than that. And
I also didn't get what you meant here. Sorry if it's me.
No, I mean, it's obviously a general point. I think I can't remember if this was part that I wrote or whether it was TJ's. I think this is TJ's.
So what does that expression key unit of measurement mean in this context?
I understood
I
it
guess
to
it's
be
the-
whether you measure in certain groups, age groups or whole populations, rather than talking about, say, a unit, it's meters or kilometers, or that's what I understand.
Yeah, or it could be that, you know, you measure perhaps the number of, you know, different compartments in the model, could be different units of measurements. It's what the data is actually measuring that you're trying to match the model to, or what you're trying to estimate.
Yeah, so I would have read it as you're modeling, as you say, at the level that the data are available to support. So you're not modeling subgroups if there's no information on those subgroups. But I don't know if that's always the case, that's what one does.
I mean, if you knew that
Oh,
some
right.
were quite different, but you didn't have data on them, then surely that might be relevant if you're planning interventions, for example.
Yeah.
I think
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
I think the wording needs to be changed because none of us are really understanding it.
Yeah.
If the authors don't understand it, I think.
Yeah, I mean, from the rest of the paragraph, it seems like it's just referring to sort of the key metric within that model rather than what the data specifies. So yeah,
I mean,
we
we
definitely
should
need to clear
just
that up.
we could just say what the model outcome is. That's what we mean, right? Model outcome or model metric.
I'm not sure we even need it. I sort of feel I'd be quite happy with that paragraph if we just deleted it, but perhaps somebody else feels it's contributing something key.
It is a little bit of a chat. Sorry to whoever wrote it.
Yeah.
I think this was something that TJ wrote in
Is
section
TJ on the
4.
call before we start telling?
No,
people?
he's not able to
Okay,
join
well,
this
we can
week.
just talk
We
about
can
this
be rude
paragraph.
about him then. But it is being recorded, so maybe be careful.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
yeah, I
I
don't
think we
know.
could put something, I mean, either we can delete that sentence or just change it. I think Jasmina's point of changing it to metric might be just an easy way of.
But maybe make a comment that if TJ feels strongly about it, we can leave it, but otherwise we could remove it.
Well, the point is being made that the model is.
I think it should be changed because
Yeah.
TJ may be the only one who actually understands what it means, but
Yes.
it's rather important that readers as well as writers understand what's said.
Yeah.
And if
And I also don't support changing it to metric, which I equally feel confused by what it might mean.
I mean, metric is also quite quantitatively, like, gives a definition of something, but models don't, wait, different models have different metrics, and maybe the same metric also doesn't mean the same thing across models. I'm still,
I don't know, this must be common usage in some field, but it's not a field that I frequent. I find it unclear, very unclear.
Yeah, so yeah, looking at the whole rest of the paragraph seems to be talking about the scale of the model. So it's saying that you could have an individual infection as your probabilistic event, or you could have a household to household as your random event. So yeah, I don't think metric or unit of measurement really work here. I don't know what does work. I mean, it might be, as Valerie said, just taking the phrase out, and the rest of the paragraph I think works without it.
Because the rest sort of explains what you're doing by example, doesn't it? So
Yeah, exactly. I think it wouldn't actually lose anything to delete those two phrases which contain unit of measurement. Still, I think the message is still there.
Yeah. No, that seems fine to me. If everyone's happy with that, I'll just put a comment to myself to know that I need to change that. And the next comment was in the simulators and emulators section at the top of section 2. Luke's comment is it might be useful to somehow indicate why UQ is the first section and not preceded by data and estimation sections. It's a relatively data-free methodology that one can use to better understand the model before endeavoring. This should help epidemiologists and modelers who are not familiar with topic to understand the place of UQ in the workflow. So I guess we kind of just launch straight into UQ. We've discussed before the ordering, but
so as a sort of somebody who uses estimation in terms of can mean different things when you estimate in epidemiological modeling, I diving into this started to be technical very quickly, was my feeling. But again, I'm not an expert in UQ, so I don't know if that was the intention.
Perhaps we just need a little bit more at the end of section 1 in the introduction, where we introduce the sections, maybe an extra sentence to sort of try and explain why UQ is the beginning. It might.
Could we say something, if we've not already, about how to do estimation sort of correctly or robustly, we need a sort of sensible overarching framework that kind of gives you the link into what UQ provides, and it's why it comes before things like data and estimation. It's like, you get the framework in place first, and then you can do all these things well. So maybe a linking sentence saying, a suitable overarching framework is required to do this properly. We're going to discuss this now in UQ, or something like that.
I think we do sort of briefly mention that in the introduction, but it's probably not in the right place for linking to section 2. So I'll add a sentence to the end of the introduction just to link that in, or at least at the beginning of UQ section.
I think at the beginning of the UQ, before you go to the UQ, I think maybe you just want an estimation title, and within then maybe a subsection.
Okay.
No, but then that estimation is the whole chapter.
Yeah, that's the only thing. I just want, we start off the UQ section and then go straight into simulations and emulation. So we could always have a kind of brief paragraph there introducing.
That would work. That'd be good. Just a few lines.
Before the first subheading and first.
Yes. And the last paragraph of section 1, it refers twice to expert elicitation.
Yep.
But the heading of section 5 is expert judgment, and indeed there is more than elicitation in that section.
Yeah.
And therefore that needs to be, Luke has pointed out this.
Yeah, I did see that. I wanted to check with everyone that you think expert judgment's a better phrase in the introduction.
It's more all-encompassing because it's more than just expert elicitation. That's
Yeah.
in the section.
Okay, thank you. So I'll put that in. Okay, thanks everyone. TJ also had a comment that in a similar area of the beginning of section 2 is flagging whether you need a qualifying statement stating what we mean by UQ. Well, I guess this kind of follows on from Luke's comment, and we could aggregate that in. So Tia said perhaps Peter, Michael, I might have some thoughts, but I've heard in a few talks people saying that you're doing UQ, even though that's not what is meant here. So I think that follows on from Ian's point that we need to say that it's an overarching framework rather than, I guess UQ with capital letters is different from small case UQ.
Can we say we're doing good UQ? Is that a bit inflammatory?
Well, I mean, the other types of
As
estimation,
in
you
compared
calculate.
to that one, Ian.
Well, you calculate uncertainty and parameters when you're doing a Bayesian estimation procedure. So there is some uncertainty being done in that case, but I guess the UQ framework is a more rigorous formal paradigm for doing that.
Yes, it tends to be attached to when you're also using a complex model. It tends
Yeah.
to be the kind of, Bayesian statistics when you also have a complex model and the intricacies that throws up.
Yeah.
In addition to the usual Bayesian paradigm where you'd write down a likelihood which may not cause you too much of a headache straight off.
Yeah.
So it tends to be attached to that. But you are right, the definition of UQ now has absorbed in lots of different areas now. So it is a bit sort of
Well, it's not
nebulous.
just that. It's just that it shares a problem with many of the jargon terms we use in statistics, which is that they have they get on take on a specialized meaning, which is a little bit different from their common language meaning.
Yes.
And here, the common language meaning is not just the common people who don't know any statistics, but all the really rather detailed statisticians who think they're quantifying uncertainty and probably are, but they're not doing UQ.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean,
So it needs to be very clearly explained that this is a technical jargon with a very specific meaning and doesn't encompass all that we would understand by UQ.
and
By uncertainty quantification.
Yeah, and the important point is that we mean all those other things as well. I mean, because UQ, uncertainty quantification, just historically, the tech term becomes when people who did design and analysis of computer experiments decided that was a boring title and wanted a more interesting title. So they just changed it to UQ. And so there's a whole tech side to it, which is why there has to be a computer model in there. If you went to a UQ conference and just thought, I'm a bit uncertain about that. Oh, I think it's about a half. And you quantified your uncertainty. No. But on the other hand, what's important for us is that we do mean that wider context as well. And so UQ is now kind of, it is obscure and it is grappling with its history, but we mean the whole area of it, the tech side and the full side as well, definitely.
Yep. So I can make a more of a paragraph at the beginning, just making it more. Are you happy for me to do that, or
Yeah,
Ian,
good
you said
plan.
you want to do it yourself? But yeah, I'm happy to work on that. So Ian sent me some references earlier for that section, which is great, but I haven't had a chance to put those in yet.
I would even say that it has specific technical meanings and it also has wider meanings. Yep, and we're looking at it from both ways.
If you're happy to write a bit, Ben, why don't you just send it around me, Michael, and Peter or something, and we can.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I can do that.
Brilliant. Thank you.
The next comment was Valerie pointed out there was quite a few uses of singular data rather than pluralized. But I think one of them that you highlighted was so it says even when the right type of data is available. I'm assuming that's still correct with singular because it's the right type of.
Yes. Sorry.
No, it's fine. I picked out quite a few myself, but I just wanted to check that one.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's fine. I mean, it was just that we needed to be consistent one way or the other through the paper.
Absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree. And as I was reading through it, stuck out.
There were places even in successive sentences where we got one and then t'other. So anyway, yeah, that sounds great.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
I think, section 3, I think it's it's there. I mean, I focus when I was reading it. I kind of focus on that mostly because I understand more that part. And I didn't really have anything to add. So I think, I don't know if the others, but to me this section kind of conveys a lot of the thoughts and most everything that we discussed.
Yeah, I made a few changes based on other people's suggestions, but I think it flows better now, and I think it
And
covers
I
everything.
like the bulletin points that turn up, because really it gives almost like a recipe for what potentially you should be thinking about.
Yeah, I think that worked very well for sections 2 and 5, so we've tried to do that for all the sections to make it more consistent. So hopefully, yeah, we haven't changed anything too much from what you originally wrote. So challenge 5 in section 3, we commented it remains. I guess it's the model discrepancy, which again has quite a specific meaning in certain frameworks, but perhaps we don't explain that well enough. And how it's different.
From the text, it seems it's something different than model specification error. And I actually interpreted it as being model misspecification.
Well,
but it's something else apparently. So I'm not sure what it's supposed to be.
What do you mean model misspecification though?
Well, maybe your model doesn't have all the necessary compartments to adequately model the natural history of disease, or you're not accounting appropriately for a heterogeneity. So there's a mismatch between the model and reality.
And how is that different to discrepancy?
Well, that's what I understand discrepancy to be. But the text, the main text says that model discrepancy associated with, let me find the line. Associated with the idea of model discrepancy is the idea of model specification. That sounds like they are associated, but they're two different things. So now I'm confused.
Well, because I mean, I think, I don't know, I vaguely remember maybe writing this or helping or changing it at some point. But so the way that model the discrepancy means something is not aligned in the model, and that can be model misspecification, can be the data is not scraped and used, or something else. And so that's why they're associated, but they're not identical.
I think one of the differences is that if you say model and misspecification, it assumes you could have a perfect model. Whereas model discrepancy, I would define as the difference between the model and the real world. And the real world is not a model. So there is an additional part there, which comes from the fact that even if we knew everything about the world, we couldn't build that perfect model. There are things you cannot model. And that I see as the difference between model discrepancy and model misspecification. There is no perfect model.
You kind of set it up yourself when you talked about error. You know, it's not particularly an error. I mean, a model is useful because it does simplify the world. I mean, the real world is just too complicated. But having done that, there is then a difference.
I think this is a semantic issue.
Partly.
I got the impression from the text that there was a very specific technique to address model discrepancy, but actually it's just making the model better. So
no, let's just step back a bit. Yeah. The model discrepancy is, you can think of it more as a sort of catch-all term for anything and everything. Okay, so one of the reasons I kind of would encourage people to draw the distinction between model misspecification and model discrepancy is all those other reasons that things might go wrong, which may not be directly attributed to your model. You could describe them in a broader model. For example, your model may be really good, but your sort of boundary conditions or your initial conditions are a little bit off. And do you include those within your model? Because if you do, then it's like model misspecification. But maybe you might say, oh, my model's dead good, but there's issues coming with boundary conditions. They will cause your model output to be different from reality. And it's not really your model's fault in that case. Your model will be a little bit different from reality because it's just a model too. So then suddenly you're talking about two contributions to model discrepancy. One is model specification, because your model maybe is good, but not quite right. The other one is maybe your boundary conditions are really quite bad. And you could just call them boundary condition uncertainty if you want to. We need an umbrella term for gathering all these things up together. For example, your model may be great, but when you solve it on a computer, it's not great. Well, that's sort of numerical code accuracy, if you want to call it that. Again, it's in the pot of model discrepancy. So we need an umbrella term to gather all these pieces together. So you're right, model misspecification, you can kind of recast a lot of these things as a broader model and say, oh, my model's just misspecified. But I don't think that's a useful way to kind of recast the word of model. I just keep making it bigger when someone points out a new thing that's wrong over here. So that's why we're going to use that terminology, if that helps. I'm not sure about that text. I'm not saying that bit of text is perfectly phrased. I'm just saying that's kind of the...
No, I mean, it depends on the analysis that you do. Imagine your model has, say, 50 inputs, but you think that 40 of them are not very important. So your analysis only really sort of pushes 10 of them. Then, you know, it's not an error of the model. It's a feature of your analysis that you need to take into account, that there is a hopefully small amount of variation that you have not accounted for in your analysis. So that would create a difference between the model analysis and the real world. But it's not really a specification error.
No, because we can never be as there's no such thing as non-misspecification. There's always misspecification. So,
but
why discuss it?
It's a testament of how big it is, of course.
One aspect, I mean, I think Ian said what I was trying to say with words. He said it much more technically right. And in that bucket is assumptions and caveats. It doesn't mean that your model is wrong, but you might have different assumptions and caveats. The three models that are planning the roadmap that were put there was a massive discussion that the wave in third anticipated wave occurs in August and some of them in October. That's a consequence of putting different assumptions on the onward transmission effect of the vaccine, for example, and what you assume about social mobility. So that doesn't mean either of those three models is wrong. It means that they possibly have some model discrepancy between them. That's how I think of discrepancy. And it's aligned with what you said, but instead of boundary conditions or initial conditions, you have model assumptions. So maybe we plainly say that. We said model characteristics, which are assumptions, boundary conditions, can give rise to model discrepancy. Different model characteristics, assumptions, and caveats give rise to model discrepancy. That's what maybe we want to say.
Yeah, I mean, when I read that, I think that word routinely is interesting. We want so the challenge is ensuring that model reality structure discrepancies are routinely accounted for within estimation processes. And I think, oh yes, I don't even know what that word routinely is meant to mean. Does that mean
it's too precise, no?
Does it mean that routinely we take on the task of doing it, or we have routine methods for doing it? I mean, routinely taking on the task is fine. Having routine methods, that will never happen.
No. Yeah, that was my interpretation of the routinely there, is that we should have the methods available and we should be considering this when we're doing analysis, whereas just ignoring it and saying, well, it's misspecification error, we can't do anything about that. Fine. I think the challenge here is in building the estimation procedures which allow you to incorporate that statistically and robustly rather than not at all. But I agree that perhaps it's a bit opaque at the moment. So I'm happy to try and reword that, but if anyone particularly wants to take on that task, then
routinely we accept the challenge of doing it. It's just that just make sure it's just not ambiguous that we had a routine method for doing
okay, if everyone's happy with that point. I think the final point was the mention of citizen scientists towards the end. That's a term
what does that mean?
Okay, so it's a term that I'm quite familiar with, which is why I wrote it there, but obviously it's not as familiar. So the idea is that rather than having kind of paid for professional scientists collecting data, that you can rely on amateur members of the public to collect data. So you get potentially a much broader scale amount of data covering larger spatial and temporal regions, because you don't have the funding.
Doesn't that need to be, sorry to ask, but doesn't that data need to be checked? And therefore
exactly, yeah.
With skills,
so I mean, there's rigorous, various organizations and data collecting bodies rely on this, and it's done in a statistically minded way a lot of the time. But it obviously has the downside that it does have potential biases that you wouldn't get in more professionally collected data, which is why I kind of suggested. So there's been a lot of work done in other fields about checking the expertise or accounting for the expertise of these scientists in the data collection, because it may be that it's just unrealistic to collect data like that on that scale with, I don't want to use the word proper, but trained epidemiologists. But people submitting data on smartphones or apps, for example, might be much more realistic.
Can I just
and in
check?
certain field.
Can I
Sorry,
check?
Philip.
Sorry, I'm just looking at this sentence and wondering if I've understood it. Links with modeling the expertise of citizen scientists could be used to assist how to combine expertise. So we're not saying we're going to use citizen scientists together with experts, but we're going to use the technology which has been produced for bringing together crowdsourcing of citizen scientists. Is that what's being said? It's nothing to do with actually bringing in the opinions of non, as it were, citizens.
I think,
but just bringing in an additional methodology.
Yeah, so there's methodology being used to collect information from citizen scientists. For example, my expertise is in the field of ecology, so that where they get people who go out collecting data on, birds or fish or whatever your area of interest is.
Butterflies is another one they do a lot.
Yeah. And the idea then is that they get they can measure the idea of how expert that person is based on various quantities. And the idea is then you incorporate that. So if it's somebody who's considered an expert, then you weight their contributions more strongly than someone who's considered less of an expert.
Well, I mean, some of the structured expert judgment protocols do that, maybe not in the same way, but they certainly incorporate this business of weighting according to exhibited expertise. I first understood it as saying something different, that we could actually bring in non-experts and incorporate their opinions too. And I think, although I don't know references, I've seen some research that suggests that could actually improve things.
So I thought that the idea was that you modeled them in order to use it. So once you've got your models going, then everybody can feed into them at an appropriate level of expertise, which is cleverly covered by the modeling.
In principle, but as far as I'm understanding how the protocols work, they typically enroll a panel of experts and not citizen scientists. So are we suggesting we should go beyond that and enroll citizen scientists too?
And if we are, I am not sure I'm comfortable with that sentence.
With the way it's worded, or you mean the idea in general?
Well, I'm not comfortable with the idea. We've already had a wave of people trying to do epidemiological modeling on what I would call back of the envelope. No, but this is what my tutor, at my first day at undergraduate, my tutor taught me two things: how to reply to a letter, and how to do back of the envelope calculation, and how to do properly. And I still to this day use back of the envelope, and a lot of epidemiological modeling that exists out there has done this. And I don't think we should be flying the flag for that. So that sentence to me flies the flag for that.
I thought that you were covered when it said, but this may not be welcomed by eminent scientists. I thought.
But I mean,
that's true.
But it's not something we want to say. Why would we like to say that? That's like opening a.
I thought it was getting into the kind of details of, for example, you're looking at sort of the risks in care homes, etc. So you could actually ask people in care homes who understand the vulnerabilities of their processes, to contribute at a level of granularity that you might not otherwise get. Whether that's useful or not, I don't know.
But that's a different aspect. So they can contribute possibly with a sort of a qualitative input and understanding what is important to do or what is important to model, but not collect the data, because they, I mean, there will be a mistake that is done if somebody not knowing how to do it collects the data?
This is a question about what the expertise they actually have. And that's what I thought was kind of envisioned here.
Yeah, I mean, in most cases, you don't just go out and ask anybody who wants to contribute. You know, there's various requirements that the people who are submitting data have to have. But it is something that works very, very well for people who, you know, in fields where they just don't have the opportunity to rely on formal surveys to do this sort of work. And you can then very much be careful about, you know, obviously you're then dealing with observational data and there's all sorts of causality issues that you have to consider, but there are protocols for dealing with these sorts of issues. Obviously the health implications are more, you know, stringent and more important than they would be in perhaps other fields, but.
I think if we leave this, we need to A, reference it, and B, make it clear that we are not saying that this is the way forward, but we are illustrating it as an example that happens in a discipline.
I'm also quite unhappy about the business which says that, you know, it can be contentious and it may not be welcomed. I don't think these value judgments, even if they're true, should really be in a document like this.
I mean, it's not an opinion piece that is asking for people to take sides.
So is the feeling that we remove that completely, or just the second half of the sentence and reference?
I think I would personally remove the last sentence, and then in a way that you're thinking of that paragraph. So what you're trying to say, and I mean what I thought we are trying to say there, is that, okay, how does it work now? There are panels of experts, and the panels of experts, such as Lorenzo just joined, so he can tell us all about it, such as SPIAM, is answering responsively, timely, doing this and that, because they have the skill sets. There are other panels which have different skill sets, like the Delve group, like the Royal Statistical Society, etc. But are they really experts in everything, or can they be supplemented by other? And I thought that's what you were trying to say. The supplement can come from maybe other discipline, from our world in data, from collaboration. So our world in data is a good example of what you may call citizen scientists, but with knowledge.
I mean, most citizen science have knowledge in the area that they're contributing to. I'm not suggesting that you just ask anybody who's got no training at all to contribute things, but
I mean, the sentence, how much, so when I read the sentence, how much diversity should be allowed as contentious as would suggest some experts' opinion are more valid than others? Why would we say that?
Yes, I don't approve of that at all. The other thing I think is that we haven't really addressed in that paragraph the question at the front, which is who is an expert? And I would be quite happy to, in many places in that paragraph, change the word expert to individual. Because, for example, I mean, I know experiments have shown that the super forecasters who have been trained to make good probability forecasts about events which they don't initially have expertise in, and they may go and do some research, can often outperform the people who are regarded as experts in the field.
Isn't the machine learning a whole discipline that says that if you train something hard enough, you're going to get the result you want?
If only.
I don't know, but you know, that's the thing.
What the machine learners want you to believe, yeah. Sometimes it's true.
Yeah, but it's also quite nicely how you often get a 90%, between 90 and 100 specificity and sensitivity in most of the published studies, but you can never repeat it again. Sorry, Ben, you're a statistician. I don't know if anyone else calls themselves statistician. I call myself a mathematician.
Well, there are some of us who might go by that label.
Very much so.
Definitely.
It's the words you put before it that are important, though.
Which is what?
Bayesian.
Statistician.
or bad. Or amateur. I sometimes call myself an amateur statistician. I think.
Or it's a citizen statistician, that's good.
I think trainee.
I think we should all be just
Yeah,
called
definitely
scientists.
trainees.
Somebody showed me a picture of a little girl with a T-shirt saying, "I don't want to be a princess anymore. I want to be a scientist." I think she can be a princess and a scientist.
I was
is
going
my
to say, yeah, they don't
opinion,
need to be
but-
mutually exclusive, but
I bet she was made to wear it.
I wanted to say back, you can be both, but I didn't want to start a conversation.
My daughter's
Eddie
asthma.
Lamar was a film actress and developed important radar technology.
Yeah, exactly.
My daughters have a T-shirt or ask for a T-shirt saying, "I don't want to be a scientist, Daddy. I want to be a princess." That's just because of the.
Excellent.
I may be joking with that point, but yeah.
Yes, I think so.
But no, I agree. I agree totally.
So I think, I mean, I don't know, this whole paragraph, if I'm not volunteering, but who is an expert? I think we don't need to be saying these things. Maybe it's about modeling. It's about modeling. It's about estimation. It's about data. It's let the science speak.
this is like
We're
an
talking
expert.
about who
this-
we're going to enroll on panels of so-called experts. But the question who is an expert isn't actually answered there. Maybe the heading should be changed. Or how to bring out expertise or something like that.
Can I say and I don't know the field very well, expert judgment or expert elicitation, what does expert mean in that sentence, in that term?
Well, it's people who know something about the field or pretend to know something, and maybe other people who think they know something about the field of interest.
Okay. So we could just use knowledgeable instead of expert throughout this paragraph.
Yeah, I don't know if that is.
If we want to keep it.
I would like to change the section, that little section heading, to something like how to develop expertise or how to capitalize on expertise. Or, I mean, it doesn't actually address the question of who is an expert at all. Except possibly whether bringing in the idea that citizen scientists might be just as expert.
Luke, you said you found a paper or somebody that'd been working on this.
I'm looking for it. It's a framework, a more or less qualitative framework to establish a citizen forum to inform the design of studies, basically. And this can easily apply to modeling as well. And you can use such a forum to feed back your results and discuss the implications as well. So it comes before and after the modeling.
Isn't it also used to actually go out and collect data? Go out and count the number of petals on the flowers in your garden or something.
Sorry, so when you said it happens before and after, there is a during modeling as well. So is this notion that the expert is somebody who's not part of the modeling team?
I think in most situations, yes, that would be the case, but
Yeah.
it's an
Another
external.
challenge is to embed the expert within the team, in
Yeah.
fact, which I think would probably be better.
Well, I think surely, I mean, we're having an expert panel and we're trying to assess uncertainty about the ingredients and outputs of a model. They have to have some contact with the model for sure.
Yeah, and they might be even part of the modeling team more directly, I think.
Well, a policymaker is also an expert who is important that we consult, but you wouldn't make them part of the team.
No, but that's not that everybody would be, not every expert would be. But when you say that, just the way you said before and after, it seemed to me to miss out.
Now, this was specific to citizen scientists.
Citizen experts. Yes, I see. Yes.
So I mean, I'm happy to change the title, but what else do people feel that we need to change about that paragraph? Obviously, the last couple of lines of.
Maybe we just need to
See
think a
if-
little bit after this conversation and
And you
take
just,
stock.
sorry, Jasmine.
No, I was just gonna saying to, I mean, because at the moment I everything is muddled for me. I just need to take stock on think through this. Sorry, Violet.
I was only saying, if you change the last sentence rather than totally removing it, is it worth just mentioning other ways of using expertise in some contexts, like the sort of ecology environment? I think also in astronomy and things, they use sort of citizen science. You know, just say this is something that occurs elsewhere if we've got a decent reference or two.
Yeah, there's been a couple of papers recently looking, you know, people looking at
so I mean, so one
telescopes for
could,
stars and
without
things.
giving any judgment one way or the other as to whether we think it's a good thing, but simply say this is something, methodology which is beginning or is being used in other fields, and with some references, and leave it at that.
Yeah.
If you want to leave it in.
I would say if we're removing, we remove from how much diversity to the end.
I agree.
Because that sentence also bothers me.
Yes, I'm with you.
Yeah, Luke, do you feel the same way? Yeah, I'm happy with that. Okay. I'll put a comment in on that. And I think that was all the comments left to discuss. Has everyone had a chance to look through that wants to do so, or is there more comments to come?
Apologies, I have not had time to actually go through the paper. I understand it's quite close to completion, at least given what Chris mentioned to me when we had a chat before. I certainly am not planning to delay things. So if you're just waiting for me.
Well, I mean, it's going to take me a bit of time to deal with the comments from tonight. So if you've got time the next,
sorry,
yeah.
I'm sorry, I was looking for, maybe I just didn't notice. I mean, the area, I mean, obviously everything overlaps, which is why it's hard to get to sort everything out. But I mean, do you talk about bias correction anywhere in here? Because I mean, obviously it's so linked to to structural discrepancy and assessment, and you know the whole notion of the question of models being has problem is under predicting now, is it likely to be under predicting in the future, and stuff like that. So I find that, I mean, bias correction, firstly, it's important. Secondly, everybody, you know, people think structural discrepancy, that sounds a bit obscure, but if you say you want to do bias correction, people say, oh, well, clearly I want to do that. Yep. So it does kind of link things up. So you might want to.
Yeah, I don't think we mentioned bias correction specifically, but there's a lot of discussion in the noisy data section about different types of biases.
Something implicit that there might be value in just having a sentence or two in here about it's not just when you do structural discrepancy trying to recognize that you know less than you think. It's also trying to move yourself, you know, to say you actually do know something about the fact that you're in the wrong place.
Yeah.
And that is, you know, if you're thinking it as bias correction, is a good link, I think. So if you stick something like that, it would be good.
So this is bias correction for model prediction, for example, via structural model discrepancy. So yes, maybe just a comment in the bits next to where we say structural model discrepancy is a useful thing or something we could put in. That, you know, this will greatly aid, improve, or allow one to do bias correction for model predictions. To separate it from data bias correction, which is related but separately.
We could mention the whole idea of post-processing, which is what they do with weather forecasts. They test weather forecasts against the data, and then they tweak them to make them more like the data, which we could do for COVID forecast. I don't think anyone has, but it's something that maybe we should be doing.
Definitely. Particularly for the realism of probability forecasts.
Yeah.
That's what they do with meteorology.
It's what you do with probability forecasts. Is to
Yes.
make it better. I can find some references.
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, that'll be really helpful.
I'll talk to Chris who does that.
So do people feel it's fairly close to, I guess, sending to Hans would be the first stage? And I guess, Lorenzo, even if we send it to Hans, then there's still possibly time before the final submission if you want to make any final comments anyway. But it's probably going to take me at least till the end of tomorrow to make these final changes, and I need to pass the EQ stuff past Ian and Peter and Michael. So
yeah, no, I have interviews all day tomorrow, so it's unlikely. But
right.
I mean, I trust you guys. It looked in really good shape last time I went through it, and you're just brilliant.
So just a question on for the across the papers, the author's contribution is like you wrote it here. That I think we discussed it previously, and I just sent an email to the intervention team or part of it. I think it sounds very nice. So I just wondered if everyone else agrees.
With what? Sorry?
The contribution, author's contribution paragraph.
Oh.
Is there one?
Yeah, so I basically used a very similar copy to the one from the policy paper.
Yeah.
But
And
if
I
anyone wants
sent
to
it
add
to
any
the
extra ones,
intervention modeling.
Oh,
So
good.
I just wanted to check. I didn't send them something that wasn't
Yeah.
right.
I mean, what we've been trying to encourage is a style whereby, you know, the organizer is the lead author, and everybody else appears as in alphabetical order. And I think so far, I mean, unless there's a very strong argument for not doing that, I think that's what we prefer, that all papers adopted that style. But obviously that's up to you guys.
Or reverse alphabetical, just to mix it up a little. Surely we should flick a coin, 50-50.
Or we can have ladies first.
Good idea, good idea. Yeah.
Considering there is only how many, 2 of us?
Randomized.
Randomized would be even better, actually.
Probably what would drive people nuts is it was randomized, but it was kept on being re-randomized every time anyone actually downloaded it.
That's a great idea.
Who's going to set up that R script?
Or we could have it self-destructing once you read it.
Mission Impossible, you know, you have 20 seconds and then sure.
Some of Michael's papers, it's quite like Mission Impossible to get through them. So that's not true, Michael. I'm sorry. I'm just joking.
But Ian, you're also senior. You're always senior author, I guess, when you go alphabetical.
Well, it looks that way, doesn't it? Yes, which is you're right. There's an advantage in that. Yes.
Nice try.
As I'm usually penultimate, which just makes it look like I've contributed nothing, but just got my name on there because I turned up to one meeting.
Oh well.
I'm happy to be anywhere.
Yeah, I certainly don't mind, and obviously, huge credit to Ben for leading this.
Yeah.
Well, we had some very good contributions, and I guess Danny helped out quite a bit at the start, so I don't know what.
Well, I didn't write any of it. I've just done lots of commenting on things, so I wasn't expecting to be an author.
Okay.
And are we sticking to one affiliation, or can we put 2? Because I have 2. I just asked.
I don't know. I think when I looked on the academic site, there was something about primary affiliation, but I don't know if that means you can't have a secondary one as well.
Okay.
There's no limit to my knowledge.
Okay. I'll have a check again, but yeah, I'm happy to put multiple.
Great. I mentioned, well, just because we are here now, Ben, I mentioned our hospitalization paper to Lorenzo, and I was wondering maybe we could revisit it with a subgroup of people here if they're interested to work, and maybe think about it, Valerie and Dennis, if you are interested to put it in that special edition as a additive paper.
Sorry, I zoned out for a minute. I was reading.
It was
I was reading further up the paper. I was actually concentrating on the paper and not on something else, but I missed the beginning of your sentence, Jasmine.
so Ben and I had this idea, and it's work in progress around. So there's a lot of questions currently. What is the good measure for instead of R or together with R? And Ben ran statistical analysis that seems to suggest we can pull out a determinant of risk, and hospitalization seems to be, which is kind of expected to be, and the paper is around telling the story of, and quantifying how much of a determinant of risk hospitalization is. We spoke, but Ben and I spoke, we've spoken to Glenn a little bit, and I mentioned it to Lorenzo, but because we are a group of people that have worked here, so if anyone else is interested to be involved, when this paper is done, we will continue meeting, and I am kind of pointing at Ben to keep organizing, where we will have a momentum on that paper and potentially explore to put it in as an edited paper in the special edition, if there is appetite for that.
What time scale are you thinking about, Jasmine?
Well, a statistical analysis done, I think we're thinking to write it within a week or draft it within a week and then share with people, and then depending.
Oh, okay, great, yeah.
But this depends on Ben.
Yeah, well, yes, the analysis is mostly done, may need a bit of work, but maybe plus or minus a couple of weeks, but certainly.
This sounds good.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, I don't think there's any problem with extra papers if if they fit.
And it might be nice to have a statistical paper. We're talking a lot about modeling, but statistical modeling is a branch of that, and this is sort of telling something that is interesting and new and adds to the knowledge. Okay, well, anyway, just checking that nobody rejects being emailed by Ben or I at some point.
Sure.
Yeah, great. Thanks for the
I
reminder,
suppose
Jasmine. That's some way.
Yeah, sorry. I'm just trying to think when you write it. So, I mean, the special issue is, as you know, challenges for future pandemics. So that's the main set of papers, and then one's got the various sort of supporting papers on specific topics and so on. So it would be good to sort of in writing it to sort of show how it links in some sense with the other papers in the volume, rather than this is just something totally separate.
Yeah, no, completely. And I think, I mean, for the title, I was thinking something around alluding to the fact that there is a challenge around finding another metric rather than R, and what can that be? So that's how I would see it links, and then yeah.
I think just again, as we've been doing with other papers, but some cross-referencing and so on, so that it clearly fits would be nice.
Okay. It is 1 minute to 6. We should all go and gain a minute, or at least on my watch. It is probably going to change before I stop speaking.
Right.
On that note, thank you very much, everyone, for your contributions, and see you possibly next week, if not.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.